Sidney Lumet has made some 39 movies in 4 decades as a film director. His first was the stunning 12 Angry Men, Dog Day Afternoon, Prince of the City, Serpico, Network, and The Verdict followed, among others. A D.W. Griffith Award winner, Lumet has just published a memoir of a life in the film business called Making Movies, and I am very pleased to have him here. Welcome.
Thank you,
It's great to see you.
Nice to see you.
I take this is the upcoming, with all the power we have, we can get an upcoming New York Times Magazine review. New York Times review. Actually, we got it because it's out early. Roger Ebert says about you, making movies is a sane, even invaluable book about the job of being a movie director. From the creation of the screenplay to the final previews, Mr. Lumet explains every step in the process, drawing examples from his own career with startling honesty. This is not an autobiography, but it is a more revealing than most memoirs, discussing with complete frankness the technical, practical, financial, and artistic decisions a director makes. He ends by saying, I am sometimes asked if there is one book a filmgoer could read to learn more about how movies are made and what to look for while watching them. Excuse me. He concludes by saying, this is the book. Why did you write this book? I mean, obviously, if you thought you were getting these kind of reviews, then you have achieved the goal of making a book that would be a companion for everybody who wants to enjoy movies.
I never expected that kind of reviews, or the kind of success it's been meeting with Charlie, where we're in our second printing, and we haven't been out that long, which is terrific. I wrote it, Charlie, because I was so tired of the theories. I was so tired of students not knowing their work. You know, I taught a postgraduate course at Yale many, many years ago. Movie course. Film, it's tough for me to say the word film. Cinema won't pass my throat. And then I did another one at Columbia about 4 years ago. I was amazed at the ignorance of the students. And then also in terms of the general public, you know, that perennial thing that happens when you, people passing when you're shooting in the city and they're passing a location, and the first thing you say is, well, what's everybody standing around for? You know, and the fact is very real work is going on. And then the second thing that happens, which is when, if they come to the studio and see some of the work there, I never knew movie making was so hard, is what they inevitably say. So I thought that there'd be kind of a value on all levels just to really get down to how is a movie made? What are the steps? Who's involved? What are their jobs? On both a creative level and a technical level. Okay.
I want to talk about all of that and also talk later about some of the actors you've worked with, whether it's Brando, Faye Dunaway, many others, and in terms of what they bring to Al Pacino, what they bring to the table when you work with them. But let me just start off talking about, where does a movie start for you?
It starts when I either have read a script that's been sent to me, and what happens, Charlie, is I just react completely instinctively. I'm not analyzing it. I have no theme. I have no idea of the kind of picture I want to do. I'm open, and a very good audience. And what to me is interesting is that almost every time I've accepted a script, it's been on the first reading. If I've had to read it more than once, chances are I've said no. And
if it doesn't grab you at first reading, then you pass.
Well, you know, there are obviously deficiencies in this. I've done some very bad movies, but I've also done some very good ones.
And you also say that some of the movies that you did because, A, you needed to work.
Absolutely.
You got tired of waiting around for the right film, so you just made one, or because you needed the money. In some cases, those films have turned out better than the movies you made because it seemed like the best thing in the world for you.
Absolutely. You know what happens? I don't think anybody good really knows when the work is going to turn out good. I'm not being falsely modest here. I think there's a reason I've gotten good results and other directors will never get good results. But it's a question of preparing the ground in such a way that the lucky accident can happen. And I know this is true of musicians. I know many writers feel that way. When you just prepare the ground so that the piece can take on a life of its own and run away with it.
Let me ask something that I've always wanted to ask you and others, and it may even apply to you in some instances. I love The Verdict. You haven't made anything since The Verdict that I like as much as I love The Verdict. Francis Ford Coppola hasn't made a movie that I really liked a lot in a while. Now, he would differ and say this was really good and this was really good. But I think the majority of film goers and critics wouldn't say that. How does someone like Coppola, you
or
occasionally, and other people who have shown they know what it's about and they're at the top of the class, fail at making good movies?
It happens, Charlie, out of two reasons. First of all, there's that very, very important area of self-deception, which is really necessary to even go to work in the first place, because the work itself is so hard. You've got to be prepared to say, I believe in this, I don't see the problem, a kind of plunging in with faith, and very often it's misdirected. I've had 2 pictures in which, around the second or third day of shooting, I realized, my God, I was wrong.
I've got to go through with it, but it's never going to be what I thought.
I've got to go through with it, and worst of all, I can't tell anybody because I'm the director, right? so there's that. Then there are pressures. It's a very strange marketplace out there now, and I know the rules of that jungle very well. And I always used to say I need 1 hit so I can get the money for 3 more flops.
Yeah.
And now it's getting even more severe. And I think, in my view, the taste level is slowly sinking in this country, not just in movies, I think generally.
Let me tell you an interesting story. I interrupt you. I had lunch yesterday with a great editor in America who said to me, who are the great poets today? Who are the great novelists today? Who are the great filmmakers today? He said, I think that we are not somehow today in our producing greatness like we used to. Now, a lot of people bemoan the good old times in the golden age of Hollywood, the golden age of television, all that. But here was somebody who would be classified as an intellectual saying, I don't see it out there. I said to him, you know, you're a great editor. Why don't you go commission a book, get somebody to write a book about that? What's happened to us? What do you think has happened in movies?
Television. I think basically what's happened, we are now probably on our 3rd generation of people who did not know life before television, and that they're used to, they've been brainwashed into a state of acceptance of what television producers think is reality. Aaron Spelling's version of what reality is. And you know that wonderful line in Network when Peter Finch, in his rage, says to the audience, for God's sakes, you're real. I'm just a picture, you know, and which really sums it up, because people's contact with reality is completely determined by the box. And it's an isolated experience. Let's just start with that. It's not done, it's not shared in any way. And in my view, it's causing a major crisis in all aspects. You know, I just came back off this book tour, Charlie, and how can you hit cities more architecturally different than, let's say, Boston, Washington, Chicago, San Francisco, L.A.? You know, they've almost got a culture. They do have a cultural difference about it. But you know what's happened?
There's a homogeneity.
Oh, every city has its Pizzeria Uno. You can go from Pizzeria Uno to Armani, you know, depending on how much money you want to spend. And every hotel is owned by the same people. We stayed at what is called a boutique hotel in San Francisco, a charming little place. It's owned by a chain, which is opening boutique individual hotels all over. And I think precisely, you used the word right on, that homogeneity is going to destroy us.
A couple of things about movies that intrigue me. You don't believe in, speaking of this, you don't believe that these testings and preview audiences, which can cause directors and studios to force directors to change endings, are necessarily good. Right?
I think it's a disaster. I think because, again, it's forcing it onto a kind of homogeneity. The whole testing process, look, I'm not a fool. I know that movies have to make money. And I'd be thrilled to change the picture, not all pictures, but some pictures, to see if it can make more money. But the fact is there is no correlation. I once asked the man who conducts the research group, what is the correlation between your percentages and the cards that you break down in demographics that make the mind boggle, and the eventual
performance at the box office?
Right. And he said, we don't have those figures.
No one's ever done a study.
No, well, of course he's lying. Of course he has the figures. The fact is the figures just don't work out the way he would like them to work out so that he can get hired more.
The other thing, another incident from the book, Brando. Brando will give you, on separate takes, separate performances. One is he's reaching deep inside as an actor and going for what is inside of him that gives expression to the idea that he wants to convey. The other is a more studied, in which he is simply acting the performance.
It looks identical, Charlie. It's just empty inside. But on the surface, it looks as if it's exactly like the other
he,
take.
as an actor, if you, the director, choose the wrong one, not the one that genuinely comes from inside, he won't give you anything from inside for the rest of the film.
You've had it. Now, you know, a lot of people say, well, listen, what right does he have? That's so arrogant. What right does he have to test a director? I don't feel that way. And maybe it's because I passed the test, but the point is that acting is about self-revelation, and that's a very painful process. And he, in my view, has a right to want the person watching it to be able to tell the difference between when he's doing it and living it and when he's simply indicating it. I don't think it's invalid.
A good director can't screw up a great script. True or false?
False.
A great script can be screwed up regardless.
Funnily enough, in my view, great scripts can get screwed up more easily because the demand that they make is so much greater. I don't have to tell you, is there anything more boring than a bad Hamlet?
Well said, yeah. And nothing more powerful than a brilliant Hamlet.
Well, that's what it was for, right?
Yeah. So acting then is 75% of the game. The performance.
Certainly in the theater. Certainly it is in the theater. In the movies, you've got a great helper. That camera. It can do an awful lot of things that can compensate for even a bad performance. It can't create a good performance, but it can provide an element that the performance should have provided.
Okay. I want to take a look from 12 Angry Men. What an appropriate film. I remember once going to a class about, and it was part of management training or something like that, and they had us see it. Some psychologists wanted to see this as a group, as an example of group dynamics, right, exactly. Certainly appropriate now as we are fascinated by what's happening in the jury room of the Simpson trial. But take a look at this. This is 12 Angry Men starring Henry Fonda and others. Here it is. Tell me about that movie and directing that scene and the way the camera pulled out so that you could see all of the people leaving the table.
Well, clearly it's a scene in which a man takes off on a racial attack, juror number 8 or whatever. I love that they never had names, only numbers. And slowly a protest evolves. One of the things that was very important, because it has to be completely believable, and it is very tough to make that believable, that 10 other people would be so, there'd be such a unanimity in an opinion, especially on a racial level, that they'd make this step of protest. But if you noticed, Henry Fonda, our hero, was not the first one to get up. The first one to get up is actually a character who has come from a very similar background. So he's the one that starts it, and then others get up out of, I hope, out of character, out of what their characters were. But the interesting thing, Charlie, is that doing it in one shot, doing it as a slow pullback, prevented it from becoming obvious and sentimental. In fact, it isn't for about till 3 or 4 people, till about the 4th person get up, that you even realize it is a protest. You don't know at first whether the guy isn't just
in the bathroom,
right? You know, just want to shake his legs. And also, by doing it in one shot, I avoided all those silly intercuts of somebody going, you know, glowering this way or drat, or any of those obvious reactions that would have had to have happened if it had been cut up. I also would have destroyed Ed's tempo. Ed Begley, who played the man, was a superb actor. And the very fact that he could gauge the performance by how and when people were getting up and moving away from, as you saw, the way he runs down in energy is quite moving.
Fonda to work with.
You know, there are certain actors, Charlie, who are so pure that, for me at least, they become a barometer of truth. I can measure the truthfulness of myself, of my own work, and almost every other person's work on that set by what they are doing. Fonda was one of those. And I don't know of a greater compliment that you think you can give anyone.
Pacino, speaking of actors, Dog Day Afternoon. There was that long scene on the phone.
I think that's as extraordinary a piece of movie acting as I've ever seen. It was very complicated, the way I set it up, because I wanted him to do both phone calls, the phone call to his male wife and his female wife, in continuity, and yet the two scenes together ran 14 minutes. I don't know if you're aware, but a magazine of film only runs 10 minutes. So I had to, from a technical point of view, I was using two cameras, starting the second camera when the first one was almost out of film, and so on. The thing about Al is he also has this purity mixed with this incredible, undeniable anger. He's so dangerous up there on the screen. Even in a moment of complete vulnerability, you know, you have a feeling that it can just turn around into something. I'll never forget that amazing moment in Godfather when, I think it was Godfather 2, when Diane Keaton tells him that she's had an abortion. And he's just been pacing up and back, very still in that inner stillness that he's got. And all of a sudden, he flies across that room and hits her. It's an explosion that's absolutely terrifying. And he has this in him, I think, this sense of rage.
What does a director give an actor like Pacino?
Two things. First of all, you give him a person who understands what he's doing, the thing that we were talking before about Marlon, which is very important to him. Second of all, once you've got that, you can find sources of stimulation for those feelings that he may not have been aware of in the performance of another actor, in the physical staging of the scene, or in the instance of the two phone calls in Dog Day Afternoon, in the way that I shot it, so that by the end of it, it got very complicated, Charlie. You know, the story was they were in that bank by then for 9 hours, and I just wanted him in a state of exhaustion beyond. Now, that state of exhaustion does another thing. It opens up emotions. I'm sure you've found, and most of us have found, that when we're tired, we weep more easily, we laugh more easily.
We get angry easier.
That's right. We're just wide open. And when we finished the first take, I said, Al, don't cut camera. I said, first, don't cut camera. Al, I want to go back and do it again. And he looked at me and he said, you've got to be expletive deleted kidding. And I said, I am not kidding. We have to go again. Action. And he started again from the top. And in the meantime, while that the exchange went on, they had changed a magazine of film. So that when he finished the second take of it, he literally didn't know where he was. I mean, the exhaustion was so complete. The amount of emotion.
Did he then recognize that the second take was better?
He didn't know. When we talked about it afterwards, he said, I didn't even know. I forgot that you told me to go again. I didn't even know we did a second take. Yeah. But when he saw Rushes the next day, he sure did.
Network. This is a Howard Beale when he's giving his speech and has a heart attack. Take a look at this, and we'll talk about the scene when we come back.
Programming you've seen
yes, it does. Tell me about the scene, though, with Peter.
Well, you know, he is a magnificent actor, and as you know, part of the point of that whole speech is that the show always ends on him having a fit.
Right.
I mean, he's in no real danger. He just has a fit, and the fit is the music cue. He's a consummate actor. Interestingly enough, the same thing that I did with Al on his Dog Day speech, I did with Peter on his first I'm mad as hell,
right.
Won't take it anymore speech. 2 cameras so he could go from one take to another. He wanted that part as badly as any actor I've ever known. I felt it was very, very important to get an American for it. And Peter was living in the Caribbean at the time. I don't remember which island and said, look, I've got with me, he flew up to New York, he said, I've got with me a tape of Walter Cronkite, a tape of John Chancellor. I am going back down, and I'm going to work for 2 weeks, and I'm going to come back up to New York, and I'm going to read this whole part for you. And he did, Charlie. He did, and he read, my reservation was only about the accent. I mean, as an actor, he's magnificent. And he came back up and read 4 lines, and Patty and I said, it's yours.
Pat Chayefsky. Yeah. And it was, did he win an Oscar for that?
He did, posthumously.
Posthumously, that's right.
It was it's extraordinary. We were, you know, before the Oscar, while the voting is still going on, the company flies you out there and you hustle like crazy trying to pick up votes. And Peter and I were scheduled to do a radio show that morning, and at Beverly Hills Hotel, there's a small staircase down from the 2nd floor, and literally as I came down the staircase, he was sitting below, and I saw him go over. And that was it.
That was it, yeah. Knowing what you know and putting a lot, as Roger Ebert says, if you want one book on making movies, this is it. The title is Making Movies. What do you wish you had learned earlier? I mean, what have you learned that's important that you wish you'd known from the beginning?
I wish I'd had a little, I don't know if you can learn this, I wish I'd had a little better taste. Taste, yeah. I think I tended to overstate an awful lot. That may have been because I really wasn't used to, having come from television, I wasn't used to an image 30 or 40 feet wide, and that's a whole different aesthetic, you know, because scale is critical.
So making for a television screen is a very different act than making for a movie screen.
Yeah, I think so. You have to tell the story differently. You have to use the camera differently. So I wish I'd had a little more restraint. But there are things I like too. I had a lot of courage, which
you were noted for making political films that had to do with a passion about politics in the broadest sense of the word, not politics and who's winning elections, but the politics of, you were passionate about that. Can you make those films today?
I think it'll be very tough. I don't know, I haven't tried, but my guess is that they are running so scared, and the cost of production is up so enormously. You know, Charlie, if a picture doesn't gross 9 figures now, by that I mean over $100 million, they really look at it as a flop.
Notwithstanding how much it costs.
Yeah, exactly.
But the reason I look at it that way is because most films now cost over $30 million to make, I guess.
I think that's the average cost has gone up to there, and the prints and advertising are now equal, if not greater, than the cost of the movie.
What's your favorite film that you made?
That I made?
Yeah.
Charlie, I wish I could tell you. I'm ducking the question, and as you know, I don't duck many.
Right.
I duck it because, in a way, it makes an orphan out of the others.
Yes, indeed. What film that you have seen do you wish you had made?
I couldn't have made it, so it's safe to say that I think the best movie of the last 10 years is Hoop Dreams.
Do you really?
I think
a documentary.
I think it's an astounding movie about America, about people. There's no way of saying too much about that movie.
Sort of missed it on the Oscars, didn't it?
I think they made a great error by trying to... well, it wasn't a great error. I would have loved to have seen it nominated for Best Picture, because to me it was.
All right. Making Movies by Sidney Lumet. It's gotten good reviews. It really is an understanding of how the business is made. You'll learn a lot about cameras. You'll learn a lot about how actors approach their craft. It is not about the gossipy book about actors and actresses. It is really a book about one man's love for the craft of making movies and how he goes about it. And when you come away with this experience of reading this book, you'll understand more about movies, which all of us love. Back in a moment. Stay with us for an extraordinary story from Chicago by an Esquire magazine reporter. Back in a moment.